a Times Union podcast. Previously on The Girl in the Pond.
When we think about this investigation, it is remarkable that they don't try to railroad somebody.
She also took a hat box and she destroyed different articles and photographs that she had of her past life, like postcards and stuff, that places where she visited. She tore them up and put them in the hat box and put the hat box down in the basement to be incinerated.
Hazel Drew met a man at the depot. They drove to Averill Park. He returned the livery wagon after midnight.
I'm Jessica Marshall.
And I'm Patrick Tyne. And we're determined to find out who Hazel Drew was.
And what happened to her. This is The Girl in the Pond.
Episode 6, Situationships.
'Tis the last rose of summer left blooming alone. All her lovely companions are faded and gone.
What if a complete stranger suddenly had access to all of your text messages and your emails? What would your life look like to that person, just from what they read or they saw in your digital footprint? Would it paint a complete and accurate picture of you? I'm guessing no. It wouldn't even come close.
She may not have had texts and emails, but Hazel Drew wrote a lot of letters. And that's all that was left to clue investigators into who she really was and what may have led to her murder. As we mentioned in the last episode, District Attorney Jarvis O'Brien and his county detectives had Hazel's trunk. She shipped it to her parents' house after quitting her job with Professor E.R. Carey on Monday, July 6, 1908. Inside, they found letters from friends. They also found letters in the trash, letters Hazel herself had written. Here's what Mark Marshall told us about those letters.
Well, what the investigators found in a waste paper basket in her Carrie's home where she stayed, they found letters that were written to other people that they received, but she had copies of the letters in a trash bin, written in pencil. And it seemed to them that she would write the letters out first to make corrections and then do a final copy and mail them out.
That's an interesting detail. She wrote letters to friends in pencil and then rewrote final copies. To me, that implies that she was meticulous, perhaps a perfectionist, or wanting to portray the image of perfection to others.
None of these letters have survived. Neither Mark, nor Sand Lake town historian Bob Moore, nor Rensselaer County historian Kathy Sheehan have ever been able to find any trace of them. Thanks to their research, though, and the relentless newspaper coverage of the case that we dug up, we know a lot about what was in them.
Hazel wrote to her chums a lot, specifically to her best friends Carrie Weaver and Mina Jones. Carrie and Mina were about Hazel's age. Both met her in Troy. Carrie worked as a domestic servant in Troy. Mina had just gotten married and moved to Waterville, Maine. Let's talk about these friends one at a time. We'll start with Carrie Weaver. Investigators tried to find Carrie Weaver, but she was on vacation in Ohio at the time. The Times Union sent a correspondent all the way out there to question her. And Carrie shared a lot of information about her friend with that reporter. Here's what she said. We're using a voice actor here like we have throughout this podcast.
Why anyone should have killed Hazel is more than I can imagine, for she never had an enemy as far as I know. I can give no theory and offer no solution of the crime.
Carrie said she and Hazel met the previous February. Carrie had been working for a wealthy family down the street from where Hazel was working.
From the time we met, we began to chum together. She was an exceedingly fine girl, good habits, honest, and of nice appearance. She was a blonde. The Carries always seemed to think much of her, as did everyone in the neighborhood.
Carrie Weaver also said that she and Hazel took a trip to New York City together on Memorial Day weekend of that year.
We had never seen the city and always wanted to. We had intended staying at the Margaret Louise home, but it being full, we stayed at a private boarding house recommended by people at the home. We returned the following Monday.
Carrie said they saw the sights, and that was it. They didn't meet any men. They didn't party. It was just a girls' trip. When they got back from New York, they spent a lot of time together in Troy.
We sometimes went out at night, but always came in early. Hazel was not a girl to run around much and never had a sweetheart. If she had, I think I would have known about it, for she made a confidant of me.
Carrie said the last time she saw Hazel was Friday, July 3rd.
What about Mina Jones? We don't know for sure how she and Hazel met, but Mina's husband told the newspapers that Hazel came over to hang out with his wife a lot. He also said Hazel came to visit Mina when the newlywed couple moved to Providence briefly earlier that year. At the time of the murder, Mina was living in Maine. According to Mina, Hazel told her she had been attacked earlier that year on a Troy street near where she worked. She said there were two, quote, foreign men, Italian or Armenian, she couldn't tell. She wasn't hurt and nothing was stolen. Mina Jones also gave police a clue into Hazel's love life. She told them Hazel said a Troy dentist had proposed to her. She didn't know his name. Hazel's former boss, Mrs. Carey, corroborated part of that story, at least the part where there was a dentist. She said Hazel had asked for more time off to go to a dentist one evening several months before she was murdered. Police scoured the city to find a dentist that matched this vague description. They finally tracked down a guy who had done some work on Hazel's teeth in the past. His name was Edward Naupf, but he flat out denied being in a relationship with her. He was a happily married man, he said.
Mina Jones also told investigators one more thing. She had gotten a letter in the last week from Minnie Taylor. Here's Mark Marshall.
3 days after Hazel's death, she wrote to Minnie Jones in Maine and told her to destroy all the letters that Hazel and her exchanged.
Okay, let's make sure we got this right. Minnie Taylor told Mina Jones to destroy all of Hazel's letters? Why?
Suddenly, Minnie Taylor had a lot more to say to the district attorney.
I recall now that once Hazel did say to me, when we were in New York, we called on a conductor. He was glad to see us, but excused himself for not being able to take us around New York, as he had to go to bed and get a little sleep before he went on his run.
A conductor in New York City. Minnie said she didn't know his name. Carrie Weaver said they didn't hang out with any men in New York.
But we're still wondering, what was Minnie's deal? She was not a suspect, but telling Mina to destroy letters from Hazel? That's sus. But maybe we're just using too much of our modern-day sensibilities to understand the actions of a grieving woman who lived more than 100 years ago. Did she really know something about Hazel's life? Or was she terrified of the truth coming out because she didn't know what it was? We'll be right back. We are always busy here in the Times Union newsroom, whether it's covering breaking news, writing in-depth features, or giving the latest local sports highlights. There is a lot that goes into what you read in print and online at timesunion.com and on all of our social channels. So join me, Jessica Marshall, every week on The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. We'll pull back the curtain and go in depth on the news that we're covering and the award-winning journalists who bring it to you at the oldest and largest newspaper in New York's capital region. Listen to The Eagle at timesunion.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
The decisions made at the state capitol in New York impact all of us, from our property taxes to the cost of health care or our civil rights. It's all really complicated, but I'm here to help you sort through it. I'm Dan Clark, author of the Capitol Confidential newsletter from the Times-Union. Find that at capitalconfidential.com. That's capital with an O. capitalconfidential.com. See you there.
You're listening to The Girl in the Pond. Now, we just learned that Mina Jones had destroyed most of her letters from Hazel Drew at Minnie Taylor's request. But, despite what the newspapermen might have thought, all was not lost, for investigators found more of Hazel's letters elsewhere.
When she parted ways with her Aunt Minnie on that Sunday, July 5th, Minnie said Hazel had a suitcase with her. That suitcase became a focal point of the investigation for a few days after Hazel's body was identified. They knew she wouldn't or couldn't go home after quitting her live-in job. And here's what we're going to bring into detail that we were sitting on. It wasn't relevant until this point in our story. Hazel's family and friends all described her to investigators and the media as someone who would never travel anywhere overnight without her nightgown and toiletries. She was obsessive about her bedtime beauty routine. So that suitcase had to be somewhere, and wherever that was a vital clue. But the suitcase was MIA. It wasn't in her trunk. It wasn't at her parents' house. Frank Smith told investigators he didn't see Hazel carrying a suitcase when he ran into her along the road near the pond the night she was believed to have been killed. But maybe she did have it with her that night in Sand Lake, somehow. On Jarvis O'Brien's orders, crews drained the pond to look for it. But they didn't find a suitcase. Finally, on July 15th, 4 days after the body was found, one of the county detectives found the suitcase at Troy's main train depot, Union Station. Hazel Drew had checked her suitcase at the baggage desk there at exactly 1:49 p.m. on Tuesday, July 7th, roughly 8 hours before investigators believed she was killed. She never came back for it.
Hazel Drew met a man at the depot. They drove to Averill Park. He returned the livery wagon after midnight.
Remember Jarvis O'Brien saying he got anonymous letters on his desk? There was now solid proof that Hazel Drew had physically been at Union Station in the afternoon on July 7th. Put a pin in that, though. We're going to come back to it. Because first, we have to go into what was in that suitcase. There was Hazel's pink nightgown and her toiletries, all things that she needed for her important bedtime routine. If she wouldn't go anywhere without that stuff, and she checked it at the station, it is reasonable to assume that she was planning on coming back for it before she went to bed that night. Remember, Averill Park and Sand Lake are only 12 miles from Troy. Probably about an hour by public transit or carriage ride back then. So it is conceivable that Sand Lake was not her planned final destination that night. It's reasonable to assume that she had intended to return to Troy that night to get her suitcase before she went somewhere else to sleep.
There was more in that suitcase, though. Here's a bit from the Times-Union on July 18th, 1908.
In her suitcase was also found a clipping from a Troy paper. It was a personal and stated that Edward Lavoie has departed for Chattanooga, Tennessee. On this piece of newspaper, the girl had written October 6th, 1907.
Who the hell is Edward Lavoie? The media immediately fixated on this Edward Lavoie. It's not clear from old newspaper reports how old Lavoie was or how he met Hazel. Some mention that he had been in the Army for about 10 years. Hazel's family didn't really seem to know about him either. William Montgomery Clemens was all in on it. He found Edward Lavoie's uncle in Troy. That guy had a lot to say.
Yes, Eddie and Hazel were sweethearts. He served in Cuba during the war, met Hazel when but a child, and I guess the young folks fancied one another. Last fall, he went south. Hazel would ask me where he was. When she got a letter, she would read it to me and cry. But Eddie is an adventurous lad and not sentimental. He wouldn't love any girl long. He's been up north somewhere lately. I don't know where exactly.
Turns out Edward Lavoie wasn't up north. He was in Tennessee, where he was stationed with the Army. He had been since October of 1907, 9 months before Hazel's murder. Clemens played around with the idea in his articles for the New York World that maybe Lavoie met up with Hazel during her travels around the Northeast in the last year, in Boston or Providence. But there was zero evidence to support this. Clemens and the New York World tracked Lavoie down in Chattanooga. They told him about what happened to Hazel. He seemed surprised.
I had been told that she disappeared on July 5th, but I did not believe that the poor girl had been murdered. I do not think that she had an enemy on earth, and there is no cause I can think of for the murder. The last time I was there was a year ago when I went on a pleasure trip to Troy. I've heard from her a number of times since then, but of late our correspondence has been irregular.
That Hazel had a fondness for male society is evidenced in other letters found, for in her correspondence come to light inquiries she had made about young men.
That's from the Times-Union coverage of the case. So far, we've talked about several, quote, boyfriends.
Or we could say boyfriends or
yeah.
I'd say boyfriends or because, you'd say both. Like
right.
That's the thing about a situationship is you don't know, right? Like what exactly you're defining the relationship as.
Exactly. It's a great, vague catch-all term. Let's talk about those situationships. There was a man Hazel's mother said dumped her for another woman when she was sick at her uncle's house earlier that year. There was a dentist who, according to Mina Jones, proposed to Hazel. The train conductor Hazel said she'd met in New York City, according to Aunt Minnie. And now we have Edward Lavoie. Is that it? No. There were more. Investigators found a photo of another young man in her trunk. His name turned out to be F.W. Shaflin. He worked as a packer in downtown Troy. One of the detectives tracked him down. We wrote about it in the Times-Union.
Mr. Shaflin was found by County Detective Kay yesterday afternoon and said he met Hazel at the skating rink at Rensselaer Park, Troy, 3 years ago.
Shaflin said he took Hazel home the night that they met. He said they hung out a few times after that, but there was nothing serious going on.
He and Hazel had been on most friendly terms for some time, but they discontinued their companionship. Hazel appeared to be a lady in every respect, and I always treated her as such, said Shaflin. He did not remember having given her his photograph, but said he might have done so. The last time he saw her, he said, was 2 years ago at Rensselaer Park.
There's one more guy to talk about here. The insurance man. William Montgomery Clemens was all over that one, too. Here's a bit from the New York Evening World on July 22nd, 1908.
They have learned that a prominent Troy insurance man, who has frequently been seen this summer driving through the Teal Pond district with a blonde girl, has evinced more than usual interest in the development of the case. So much so that his demeanor has brought him under suspicion.
There is no confirmation that this blonde girl is Hazel, of course. But according to Clemens here, investigators were looking into this. And Mark Marshall says there is evidence to support a situationship between Hazel and an insurance man.
And that's why during Hazel's case, the investigation, there's a lot of reports that she was seen with an insurance man. Oh. And so we tried to tie that to Hislop.
Yes, that's right. Hazel's first boss, Thomas Hislop. Remember, he was the former Troy City treasurer, and he was run out of politics after his deputy was caught stealing money from the tax rolls. Well, it turns out Hislop became an insurance salesman after that whole debacle. Clemens talked to a few members of a Troy men's chorus who met an insurance man in Utica during the week after the body was found. They said that he was talking obsessively about the case.
It was remarked at the time, the singers state, that the man's actions were suspicious, but he was not linked with the tragedy until the story came to the ears of the Sand Lake farmers, who recall having seen him driving through their town on different occasions with a young woman of striking appearance, such as that of the victim of the pond tragedy.
Hazel did have a $500 life insurance policy, so maybe at least there is some kind of a connection that this man, Thomas Hislop or not, was her insurance salesman.
Let's go back to Hazel's letters for a moment. Specifically the ones investigators found in the trash at Hazel's former boss's house. Mark Marshall thought a lot about those letters. He'd never seen them, of course, but he studied everything on the record about them. And he discovered something about these letters that no one seemed to have ever considered before.
They also found that in her waste paper basket. It was a sheet of paper that was torn up, and on it was written Florence Barker. And I'm the one who found that out.
Florence Barker. It was written over and over in pencil.
The detectives didn't know who Florence Barker was. And so they didn't make anything too much of it. It was written only in a couple of papers. She was practicing writing Florence Barker down in a sheet of paper.
Mark scoured old census records to find out who Florence Barker was.
Well, come to find out, she was the wife of William Barker, who lived across the street from the Carries. He was the president of Barker Collar and Cuff in Troy. Very rich. Very rich. He did have offices in New York City and in Boston. Those are the two cities that Hazel went to.
He was like a real magnate. Like he was emblematic of he would be like one of the richest guys in Troy.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Would he have known Hazel likely? Like, just from being associated across the street?
How would you say it? Charismatic type of guy.
He had charisma. He had the riz.
Yes. Yeah. Now, he wore glasses. And I was going to ask you if you have access to the Times Union records, papers back then.
Oh, yeah. We got them all.
We do.
In one of them, I think it's July 28th. I can't read the whole thing, but it says something about Hazel being seen down in Troy with a man wearing glasses.
Okay.
And that rang a bell with Barker because Barker did wear glasses. But I couldn't read the rest of the column.
Yeah.
Because it was rolled back.
Let's see if I can find that. We found that article. It was from Monday, July 27th, 1908.
It was to the effect that Hazel was in the habit of going out with a young man who wore glasses.
Just that one line. It doesn't implicate Barker in any way. It doesn't even mention him. But why would Hazel be practicing the signature of William Barker's wife? Was she trying to assume her identity? Because she was having an affair with Barker and they were planning to run away together? Well, that would make for the most salacious headline, but maybe it was something more innocent. The fanciful scribblings of a girl just trying to emulate a woman that she admired. Whatever the case, it certainly does not prove that Barker killed her or had anything to do with her murder. In fact, none of this cataloging of Hazel's situationships really tells us anything about who killed her. Honestly, it's starting to feel a little icky to focus so much on these boyfriends. Maybe it is statistically more likely that a romantic partner is the murderer, but it feels like the media and the investigators at the time, by focusing so heavily on her love life, were still in part placing the blame on the victim here. She had so many boyfriends, of course she got herself killed. If you're not convinced of that like we are, consider what else was written in the Times-Union article that mentions the guy with glasses.
The detectives have located nearly every man who had ever been associated with Hazel, and they have learned that the girl was as vain as a peacock and most coquettish. Her one ambition seemed to be that she would glory over girls in her conquests. If she had a sweetheart who was steady in his attentions to her, he has not been discovered or located. The girl had the reputation for liking to have the attentions of scores of men. She liked to boast to her girlfriends that she, quote, could get any fellow she wanted. Most of her callers were one-night stands. For the second time they came around, she managed to get rid of them. She liked to correspond with men whom she met out of town, and these letters she would proudly display to her girlfriends. She wanted to conceal from them that she was employed as a domestic, and it is related that she resorted to many subterfuges to prevent the young men with whom she had been out going all the way home with her.
It's very worth noting here that this article says every man she knew said she was a flirt, but every woman who was interviewed said Hazel was a virtuous and proper young lady.
That type of dichotomy was very much a cultural mode of that era. You were either virtuous or promiscuous. The women who were questioned felt the need to protect Hazel, and, by extension, each other. The men felt the need to protect themselves.
At this point, we have two very different pictures of Hazel's personality. She only exists for us on a page, and it's a painting of a painting. Something's lost in the translation. We still don't really have a clear picture of who she was. Also, there's never been a consideration that Hazel may have been killed by a woman. Given the lack of solid evidence that we're working with here overall, if Hazel was hell-bent on lording her male conquests over the competition, maybe a jealous friend did it or arranged it. That rabbit hole goes pretty deep, but it doesn't lead to any more clarity on who Hazel was and why she was killed. One more thing. Remember, we kind of made a big deal out of the reporter William Montgomery Clemens finding a hatbox full of Hazel's stuff that was discarded in the basement of the Careys' house. Just sitting there, waiting to be incinerated? What was in that hatbox? According to newspaper reports, it contained torn-up mementos of Hazel's life. Photos of herself, photos of friends, letters from friends, cards, souvenirs from her travels. The truth is, we don't really know exactly what was in that box. But that doesn't really matter, because it still tells us something huge. Hazel was very purposefully tearing up pieces of her life, destroying evidence of the experiences and the relationships that she'd had up to this point.
Was Hazel trying to start a new life? William Montgomery Clemens, the reporter, thought so. He wrote as much in an article in the New York World on July 23, 1908.
Why did Hazel visit all of her relatives on the Saturday and Sunday before her disappearance? Why did she seek to destroy all traces of her former life by tearing up photos of herself and friends, letters, cards, and souvenirs? Was she prepared to enter a new life in which mementos of the old would have troubled her?
She discarded memories. She left her suitcase at a train station. She was practicing the signature of another woman. The idea that Hazel Drew might be trying to leave Troy to start a new life as someone else is not a ridiculous thought.
But if she was intent on leaving town to start that new life, why did she go to Teal's Pond that fateful night?
Was it because, as the media and investigators may have believed, that she went to meet a boyfriend? Or was there some other reason that we haven't thought of, but that now makes perfect sense? If she was planning on starting a new life somewhere else, could she have gone out to Teal's Pond to say goodbye to somebody?
'Tis the last rose of summer left blooming alone. All her lovely colors.
Next time on The Girl in the Pond, we'll trace Hazel's many movements in the days before her body was found.
Why did she put that suitcase in the locker in Union Station? She clearly was going someplace. What's that all about? That's weird. Why don't you take your suitcase with you if you're planning on going traveling someplace?
On the way back up, they saw a couple dudes next to the pond that they ended up finding her in.
To reflect back her blushes or give sigh for sigh.
The Girl in the Pond is a production of the Times-Union. It's produced by me, Jessica Marshall, and Patrick Tyne. Written and edited by me, Jessica Marshall. Editorial direction and fact-checking by Erica Smith and Casey Seiler. Production help from Daniel Roberts, Sarah Diodato, and Mike Goodwin. Special thanks to Tony Pallone, Amira Ditchy, Steve Hughes, Shannon Froma, Rick Marshall, and David Johnson for lending their voices. Our theme song is The Last Rose of Summer, written by Thomas Moore. Musical arrangement by Matthew A. Streifert. Vocals by Josephine Diodato. Additional music supplied by Lionel Cohen and Francois Couture via Getty Images. A previous version of this episode mistakenly stated that Carrie Weaver lived in Watervliet. Carrie Weaver actually lived and worked in Troy. It's been corrected.